I woke up this morning and saw a bunch of different conflicting reports on the status of the Atlanta Falcons. First thing I saw was that 4 players tested positive for COVID-19. Then it got adjusted not too long after that. Whoops, my bad. It was just a staff member, not any players. The Falcons, they shut down their facilities today. They worked remotely today, and they're, at least for now, planning to open up shop tomorrow and keep it business as usual. As far as right now, the recording of this podcast, it looks like the game between the Vikings and the Falcons for Sunday is still on, something to keep an eye on. Vikings versus Falcons preview. Much like the Minnesota Vikings, the Atlanta Falcons, you look at their record contrast to their roster, the talent that they have, and you say, what? Really? So the Vikings, they're 1-4. The Falcons, they're 0-5. And it really just doesn't add up compared to the talent that they have. Ton of key matchups. In this one, we're going to first start with Atlanta's defense. They've got some serious athletes along their front seven, whether you're talking about Todd McKinley, Dante Fowler, Deion Jones. Those dudes, they can play. Grady Jarrett in particular, though, he is an absolute force, and he can line up anywhere in the interior of the D-line, whether he's lined up across opposing left guards or right guards. If Drew Samia plays, and I say that because as of Thursday's injury report, he was listed as a non-participant in practice. And even if he's healthy to play, expect him to start, even though he's been playing downright awful, because Gary Kubiak gave this man a shot of confidence. And I'm paraphrasing here. He says something along the lines of, we believe in Drew Samia, and he's just going through the growing pains right now. He's going to get better. What? So if Drew Samia is to play, is to be the starting right guard on Sunday, expect Grady Jarrett to stick on the left side. Now, if he doesn't play, Gary Kubiak also mentioned that both Ezra Cleveland and Oli Udoh, they've been getting work at both offensive tackle and offensive guard. So something to keep an eye on leading up to Sunday's game. Bottom line, if the offensive line can hold their own against this athletic front seven of the Atlanta Falcons, Kirk Cousins can go off on this Atlanta Falcons secondary. Their IQ is non-existent, especially on the play-action passes, because for the secondary, instead of continuously moving and shuffling their feet, and you know what, for all they know, maybe the quarterback is actually handing the ball off to the running back. But when the quarterback pulls the ball back and is actually throwing the ball downfield, instead of shuffling their feet, they basically get cinder blocks for feet. They basically stand there and then react after the fact, which is why there's so much distance more often than not between the receiver and the nearest defender. If the offensive line holds up, if the Minnesota Vikings are going to win, it starts with the offensive line. If the offensive line holds up, Kirk Cousins, there are holes in this secondary for Kirk Cousins to find. Irv Smith Jr., I expect him to be the key receiver in this game, continuing his strong performance from last Sunday night against Seattle. Also, the Falcons defense is very susceptible to giving up big plays in the passing game to opposing running backs. And I'm talking about beyond catching passes out of the backfield. We saw that against Carolina. We saw that against Green Bay. I'm talking about running backs that run those intermediate routes that run down the field. Alexander Mattison, he'll have a very nice game. It's not expected that Dalvin Cook will play. As far as Thursday's injury report is concerned, he's listed at DNP. Alexander Mattison, I think he'll be fine. But this game is screaming for Mike Boone to have a big game if he gets those opportunities. Other ways that you can confuse Atlanta's defense and get yourself even more separation: draw screens, get your players to the perimeter, so jet sweeps, and play action. That's going to be your bread and butter. So in order to sell it effectively, we know Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook, they can really sell the play action. Kirk Cousins and Alexander Mattison, they have to be on the same page. But again, it comes down to the offensive line of the Minnesota Vikings. We now move to Atlanta's offense. Big question, will Julio Jones even play? Was last listed as a non-participant in practice. If Julio Jones is active against the Vikings this Sunday, you can pretty much expect all hell to break loose, because much like the Falcons secondary, the Vikings secondary, they have not been great either. In fact, whether Julio Jones, whether he plays or not, if you're the Vikings defense, you always have to be cognizant of where number 18 is at pre-snap and beyond, and that's Calvin Ridley. special player. I mean, what a leap he has made in his third year out of Alabama. In fact, much like Seattle, Atlanta, they like to go with the deep ball as well, namely to Calvin Ridley. So the Vikings secondary, they're going to have their work cut out for them. Cam Dantzler, you have to play better. You got tore up by DK Metcalf last Sunday night. And maybe, just maybe, a suggestion to Mike Zimmer, instead of constantly having your corners play soft coverage pre-snap, maybe once in a while, just have them play some press coverage situations. I don't know. Just an idea. What the fuck do I know? Now, regarding the Falcons' offensive philosophy, their strong suit is in their play action game. So, in fact, someone who almost always finds himself open in the play action attack beyond Calvin Ridley is their tight end Hayden Hurst. So I would expect a lot of Eric Kendricks in that regard to challenge a couple of those opportunities. And then we get to Matt Ryan, who, very solid quarterback, but something that I've noticed is that when chaos presents itself to Matt Ryan, instead of throwing the ball to the feet of his receivers for an incomplete to live to play another down, or when he's outside the tackle box, simply throwing it out of bounds, he will chuck that ball up for grabs. So a couple of errant passes, couple of opportunities for the Vikings secondary to come away with a couple of pass breakups or maybe even an interception or two. But then even if he doesn't do that, sometimes he'll hold on to the football much too long, much like Kirk Cousins. So I'm looking at Yannick Ngakoue and Eric Wilson to create consistent pressure on Matt Ryan. In fact, going back to Eric Wilson, his career game against Seattle last Sunday night, all of a sudden, a light bulb went off in everyone's head. Oh, my God, Eric Wilson, did you see that game? Oh, my God, we may have something here. And I'm sitting here like, duh. I've been saying this shit for 2 years. Eric Wilson can play. In fact, during the offseason, I did a whole podcast. Eric Wilson is a better player than Anthony Barr, and I got absolutely shat on for it. Going back to Sunday night, his sack against Russell Wilson, where he pressured Russell Wilson, and he didn't commit to a full jump to where Russell Wilson, he would have just ran right by it and extend the play. He did a subtle hop to where he could come back on the ground relatively quickly and make that sack. That is a hybrid athletic-ass play by Eric Wilson. I'm an Eric Wilson stan. I love to see that he's finally getting his opportunity. Kudos to Eric Wilson. But if they're going to win defensively, you have to get consistent pressure on Matt Ryan. And then also, you can't forget about Todd Gurley because, you know what, he's not the same guy, but the last 3 games, he's come on really strong. So you really need interior pressure. And with the lack of interior pressure we've had on the D-line for the vast majority of this season, I want to see more of James Lynch. The man, you could clearly see on his film coming out of Baylor that this dude can play. And what else do you have to lose? I think James Lynch could really help out in the run game, and he can rush the passer in the interior. I want to see more of James Lynch. The Atlanta Falcons, what's also really interesting about them is that they're like the boxer who comes out just gun swinging, throwing nothing but haymakers and using all their energy up early in the early rounds. You saw they were up by 3 scores against Dallas. They were up by 2 scores against Chicago. But as you go into the later final rounds in the fourth quarter, that's where they usually fall apart. And because of that, I would tend to say that the Vikings, I mean, they're 1-4. They're really not that. They're 1 game better than the Atlanta Falcons. I would tend to say that the Minnesota Vikings, they should win this game. I think they're going to win. But a key element here is that they just fired their head coach. Dan Quinn is gone. So you always see this. I feel like I always see this. We saw this with the Texans last week. They fired Bill O'Brien. All of a sudden, they got to win. You always see this where in sports, when they fire their head coach that's been around for too long, and I don't know how the players felt about Dan Quinn. Maybe Falcons fans, you can keep me informed. How do you feel about him? He seemed like a good guy. But you see this when they fire their head coach, suddenly there's a new spark, there's a new energy, there's new juice to that team. So with interim head coach Raheem Morris, don't be surprised if all of a sudden the Atlanta Falcons, they're playing lights out. They got something to prove. So I think the Vikings will win. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. We do this 3 times a week. Mediocre Best Sports Podcast with Realistic Randy. Check me out on Twitter at realistic_Randy. Facebook at Realistic Randy. We'll see you on Monday.